3 weeks had passed since the kitchen full of broken glass, and the Choi estate had settled into something Simone hadn't felt within these walls in 8 years. Not peace exactly, but the fragile architecture peace gets built from. Small things. Tae-hyun knocking before entering rooms that were technically his. Tae-hyun asking, instead of assuming, whether she'd already eaten. Tae-hyun's hand finding the small of her back when they crossed a room together, not for show anymore, but because he seemed to have discovered he liked being close enough to touch her. Simone hadn't decided yet what to call what was growing between them. She only knew that some mornings now, waking beside him, she caught herself watching the rise and fall of his chest before either of them opened their eyes, tracing the line of his jaw with her gaze the way she used to trace exit routes on a floor plan, memorizing him instead of memorizing danger, and felt something dangerously close to tenderness, where 8 years of quiet resentment used to live. She hadn't opened Marcus's folder. It sat in the false drawer beside the burner phone, patient, waiting, a door she hadn't locked but hadn't walked through either. This morning, though, the piece cracked slightly at the edges. "There's a gala," Tae-hyun said over breakfast, sliding a cream-colored invitation across the table between the persimmon slices and the rice porridge. "The Kang Industries anniversary. Every major family in Seoul will be there. My father's already confirmed our attendance." Simone read the card without touching it. As what? The dutiful wife who pours tea, or the woman who put 3 of your father's most trusted advisors on notice after the attack? "As my wife," Tae-hyun said, and something in the way he said it, steady, deliberate, no hesitation, made her look up at him properly. "The only version of that I want standing next to me now is the real one." "That's a public declaration, Tae-hyun. Once people see me standing beside you like that, they'll start asking questions. About where I came from. About what I actually am." "Good," he said. "Let them ask." Chicago, 9 years earlier, the memory came to her later that morning. Unbidden, while she stood at the same writing desk sorting through the gala's guest list. The way memory sometimes arrives sideways, triggered by something as small as the smell of roasted coffee drifting up from the estate's kitchen. Close enough to the bitter espresso, she used to drink at 4 in the morning in a Chicago high-rise that overlooked a city she owned in every way that mattered except on paper. She'd been 23 when she first met Choi Tae-hyun, at a business summit her grandmother had insisted she attend. A rare olive branch extended between 2 families who understood each other's world without ever formally acknowledging it, the American syndicate and the Korean one, circling each other at a respectful distance across 2 continents. Simone remembered exactly what she'd been wearing. A black suit tailored sharp enough to cut, hair pulled back, the kind of composed authority she'd spent 6 years learning to wear like armor after her grandmother handed her the reins of an empire most men twice her age would have killed for. Tae-hyun had been 26 then, sent by his father as a junior representative, and Simone remembered being irritated by how little he seemed to understand about the room he was standing in, too direct, too unpolished in the particular diplomatic language their world required, asking questions in a boardroom full of people who'd spent decades learning never to ask questions directly. She'd expected to dismiss him within the hour. Instead, she'd found herself standing beside him on a hotel terrace at midnight, both of them having slipped away from a dinner neither particularly wanted to attend, and he'd asked her, bluntly, the same directness that had irritated her hours earlier, what it felt like to inherit a throne nobody had asked her if she wanted. "Heavy," she'd told him, surprised at her own honesty. "Like wearing a crown made of everyone else's expectations instead of my own choices." "Then why wear it?" Because it was never really a question of choice. It was blood, obligation, the weight of what my grandmother built and everyone who came before her. That sounds lonely. She remembered the way he'd said it, not pitying, just observant, the first person in years who'd looked past the crown to notice the person underneath it was tired. She'd fallen in love with him slowly after that, over 6 months of stolen conversations across 2 continents, phone calls that ran until dawn. A courtship conducted mostly in secret because neither family fully trusted what an alliance built on love instead of strategy might mean for either empire. The night before her wedding, Marcus had found her on the rooftop of her grandmother's building, the city spread out below them in 1,000 indifferent lights, and asked her the question that still echoed sometimes, 9 years later in the quiet hours before dawn. really doing this, walking away from all of it. Not walking away from anything. I'm choosing something else. You know what they'll say, that the quiet queen gave up her throne for a man. Them say it. She'd looked at her cousin, 20 years old and already carrying the particular weight of loyalty that would define the rest of his life. I don't want to run anything, Marcus. I just want to be someone's peace. Is that so hard to understand? Peace isn't something a man like that knows how to give a woman, not even one he loves. Laughed at him then, certain he was wrong, certain that love was enough to build a life on. It had taken 8 years of silence and small humiliations to learn exactly how right Marcus had been, and exactly how much work it would take, from both of them, to finally prove him wrong instead. Simone set down the pen she'd been holding, the guest list forgotten, and pressed her palm flat against the cool surface of the desk, breathing through the particular ache that memory always brought with it. 9 years ago, she'd chosen peace over power. Now, watching Taehyun finally learn to be worthy of that choice, she found herself wondering if she could have both, if the throne and the peace had ever really been mutually exclusive at all, or if that had only ever been the story she'd told herself to make the leaving easier. The market 3 blocks from the estate had changed with the season, persimmons gone, replaced now with mandarins stacked in bright orange pyramids, the smell of roasting chestnuts thick in the cold morning air, vendors calling out prices in rapid Korean over the low hum of Sunday foot traffic. Simone moved through it with Taehyun beside her for the first time in 8 years, an ordinary thing married couples did that they had somehow never done, and she found herself unexpectedly moved by how normal it felt, how dangerous that normalcy was, how easily she could get used to it. "Never walked through a market with me," she said, testing a mandarin's give with her thumb before setting it back on the pile. "I never made the time." Taehyun paid the vendor before Simone could reach for her wallet, an old habit she noted without comment. "I told myself the business mattered more. I told myself a lot of things that were easier to believe than admitting I'd stopped seeing you. Now I keep noticing things I should have noticed years ago." He glanced sideways at her, something warmer than she was used to seeing in his eyes. "You hum when you're deciding what to buy. You always have. I don't know how I missed it for 8 years." Simone felt heat rise in her face that had nothing to do with the cold. "Careful," she said, mostly to herself. "Of what? Of making me believe you." He didn't answer right away, just reached over and laced his fingers through hers, right there in the middle of the crowded street, in front of vendors and shoppers and anyone who might report the sight back to families who still weren't sure what to make of the Choi marriage. "Not trying to make you believe me," he said quietly. "I'm trying to earn it." "There's a difference." Simone let her fingers stay wrapped in his, walking the rest of the market that way, and didn't examine too closely why it felt like something loosening in her chest that had been clenched for 8 years. They stopped at a small stall selling hotiox sweet syrup-filled pancakes fried golden on a flat iron griddle, steam rising into the cold air, and Taehyun bought 2, splitting one and handing her the larger half without being asked, another small thing, another quiet correction to 8 years of not noticing what she preferred. "You always give me the bigger piece now," she observed, watching him over the pancake. "Have 8 years of smaller pieces to make up for," he said simply, and the honesty of it. Unguarded and a little raw, did something to her chest that she wasn't ready to name. Marcus called that night, his voice tight in a way she recognized instantly from childhood, the tone he used when something had gone sideways, and he was deciding how much of it she needed to hear. "Ijiros aren't finished," he said without preamble. "Danlady's father, old man Ijiro himself, is in Seoul. Arrived 2 days ago under a shell company registration. He doesn't send himself unless the stakes have changed." Simone sat up straighter at the writing desk, the false drawer still open beside her. Why would the patriarch come personally? Yuna failed. The attack failed. He should be cutting his losses, not doubling down. "Because it's not just business to him anymore," Marcus said. "You embarrassed his family twice, once 9 years ago when you walked away with everything they wanted, and again 3 weeks ago when you dismantled an operation his own son planned. Old man Ijiro doesn't forgive humiliation. He escalates against it. What's the play? I don't know yet, but he's been seen at 2 events this week where Choi family associates were also present. He's establishing a social footprint. Whatever he's planning, it's not another break-in." Marcus's voice dropped lower. "It's public. He wants an audience." Simone closed her eyes, already understanding. "The Kang Gala. If he's there, And you're there standing next to Tae-hyun as his wife for the first time in public in 8 years. That's exactly the kind of audience a man like Ejiro would want. A stage, witnesses, maximum humiliation, delivered where the whole underworld can see it happen. Then I need to be ready before he is. Simone. Marcus's voice carried a warning she hadn't heard from him since they were teenagers, since the night before her wedding. This isn't a household intrusion you can handle with a cast-iron pan and good instincts. This is Ejiro himself, in a room full of people whose loyalty could shift depending on what they witness. If this goes wrong in public, it doesn't just threaten you. It threatens everything Tae-hyun's family has built for 3 generations. Then I suppose, Simone said, we make sure it doesn't go wrong. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in a rented apartment overlooking Gangnam's glittering skyline. Surveillance photos spread across a table that had seen too many nights like this one, and thought about the particular exhaustion of loving someone whose battles were never quite his own to fight, and yet always somehow were. His phone buzzed with a message from Hyun, the one contact inside the Choi organization he trusted enough to run this operation through without Tae-hyun's knowledge. A security coordinator who'd quietly fed him information since the night of the attack, when she'd recognized something in the way Simone moved through the chaos that told her exactly who she was dealing with. Ejiro's people made contact with 2 of the smaller families tonight. Kang cousins, minor branch, feeling them out. Nothing confirmed yet. Marcus typed back, keep watching. Don't engage. He set the phone down and rubbed both hands over his face, exhaustion settling into his bones in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. 9 years of watching his cousin build a life for herself out of pieces, she'd deliberately broken off from the throne she was born to inherit. And now here he was again, running counter-surveillance in a foreign city, trying to protect a woman who had never once, in her entire life, actually needed protecting so much as she'd needed someone willing to stand beside her while she protected everyone else. He thought about what he hadn't told her yet, that Danladi Ejiro's father hadn't just come to intimidate. He'd come with something else, a name from a decade-old file that Marcus had spent 2 days confirming before he was certain enough to bring it to her. Simone's grandmother had buried secrets in her lifetime that even Simone didn't fully know. Old debts, old enemies, old alliances struck in blood before Simone was even born. And Ejiro's father had apparently spent 9 years digging through exactly those buried histories, waiting for the moment he'd have leverage enough to use them. Marcus poured himself a drink he didn't finish and stared out at the city lights, wondering, not for the first time, whether the throne Simone had walked away from had ever really let her go at all, or whether it had simply been waiting, patient as blood always is, for the right moment to call her back. If you're just discovering this story tonight, welcome. And if you've been here since the wrist grab that started it all, watching a quiet woman slowly remember exactly what she's capable of, welcome back. Stories like this one reward patience, so settle in for what's coming. Tap like if you can feel the tension building toward something bigger. Subscribe if you want to be here when it finally breaks. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. Now, back to Seoul, where an old enemy was about to walk into a room Simone Kim had no intention of losing. Tae-hyun found her in the study 2 nights before the gala, surrounded by architectural floor plans of the Kang Industries ballroom, a cup of tea gone cold at her elbow. Planning this like an operation, he said, closing the door behind him. Because it is one. Simone didn't look up from the floor plan, tracing exit routes with one finger. Danladi Ejiro's father is here to make a point in front of every family that matters in this city. If he succeeds, it won't just embarrass us. We'll signal to everyone watching that the Choi family can be moved against without consequence. That kind of perception gets people killed, Tae-hyun. Slowly, over months, as smaller families start testing what they think is a new weakness. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the desk, close enough that she had to tilt her head up to hold his gaze. You're protecting my family. I'm protecting what's mine, she said, and the word landed between them with more weight than either of them expected. This house. This name, you apparently, though God knows why after everything. That again. Which part? The part where I'm yours. His voice had gone rough, quiet, and he reached out to tuck a strand of her silver pixie cut behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her jaw. I've spent 8 years being someone you had to survive. I want to hear what it sounds like when you say I'm something you'd choose to keep." Simone set down her pen slowly, aware of how close he'd gotten, aware of the particular electricity that had been building between them for 3 weeks now, unspoken, patient, waiting for one of them to stop being careful. "Mine," she said quietly, "which means Ejiro made his first mistake the moment he decided to come after what belongs to me." Taehyun didn't answer with words. He closed the last of the distance between them and kissed her, not the tentative, asking kiss from the garden 3 weeks earlier, but something deeper, more certain, his hand sliding to the back of her neck as she rose from her chair to meet him, floor plans forgotten beneath her palms flat against the desk. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I used to think I married you because it was convenient," he murmured. "Politically sound. Beneficial to both families. Now I think I've spent 8 years too blind to realize I married the only woman who was ever actually worth fighting for." His thumb traced her jaw. "I don't want to survive this marriage anymore, Simone. I want to be worthy of it." She kissed him again before either of them could say anything else. Slower this time, deliberate. Both of them finally allowing themselves the particular luxury of not rushing toward anything, of simply staying exactly where they were for as long as they wanted. Night of the gala, Simone stood in front of the mirror in a floor-length gown the color of deep emerald silk, the kind of green that made her light brown skin look burnished gold under the bedroom's warm light, gold jewelry at her throat and wrists. No gloves this time, nothing to hide the strength in her hands. Taehyun appeared in the doorway in a black tuxedo and stopped walking the moment he saw her, something unguarded crossing his face that she hadn't seen from him since before the marriage went quiet. "You look like the woman half this city used to be afraid of," he said. "Good," Simone said, meeting her own eyes in the mirror. "Because tonight I intend to remind them why." He crossed the room and stood behind her, both of them reflected together in the glass, his hands settling at her waist. "Whatever happens tonight," he said quietly against her ear, "you're not facing it alone, not this time." "I know." She turned in his arms to face him properly. "That's what's different now." Kang Industries' ballroom glittered with old money, crystal chandeliers throwing warm light across marble floors, a live orchestra playing something classical and unhurried, the particular hush of a room full of powerful people performing the careful choreography of alliance and rivalry disguised as conversation. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres, and somewhere near the far windows, an ice sculpture melted slowly under the chandelier's glow, dripping into a silver basin no one was watching. Simone felt eyes turn toward them the moment they entered, Taehyun in his tailored black tuxedo, Simone on his arm in emerald silk. The first time in 8 years the Choi wife had appeared at a major event as anything other than a quiet shadow trailing half a step behind her husband. Whispers moved through the room like wind through tall grass, and Simone kept her chin level, her expression composed, exactly the way she used to walk into boardrooms in Chicago that had once fallen silent the moment she crossed the threshold. Marcus found them within 20 minutes, impeccable in a dark suit, playing his role as an unrelated business associate with the easy fluency of a man who'd spent his career moving unseen through exactly these kinds of rooms. "He's here," Marcus said quietly, angling his body so it looked like casual conversation. "East wing near the private lounge. He's brought 4 men, all positioned at different exits. Then we make sure he never gets close enough to use them," Simone said, scanning the room with the same unhurried precision she'd once used walking her own boardroom floor. "Taehyun, you need to be seen holding court exactly the way your father would expect. Business as usual. Give him no reason to think anything's wrong before it needs to be. You? Going to go remind an old man exactly who he's dealing with." She found Danladi Ajiro's father near the private lounge, exactly where Marcus had said he'd be, a tall man in his 70s with silver hair, and the particular stillness of someone who'd survived 4 decades in an industry that killed most men within one. He was watching the ballroom the way a hawk watches a field, and when Simone approached alone, unhurried, a glass of champagne untouched in her hand, something flickered across his face that might have been surprise. "Quiet queen," he said, in accented but precise Korean before switching smoothly to English. "I wondered if you'd have the nerve to speak to me directly." "I heard you came to Seoul personally," Simone said, matching his stillness with her own. "That's either a great honor or a great mistake." "I haven't decided which yet. Your family's empire crumbled the moment you walked away from it, he said, watching her carefully. I've spent 9 years wondering what exactly Choi Tae-hyun saw in a woman who abandoned her own throne for a marriage that clearly made her small. Careful, old man. Simone's voice didn't rise, didn't shift, remained exactly as level as it had been in every dining room, every kitchen, every hallway she'd survived in the city. You sent your granddaughter by proxy into my home to destabilize my marriage. You sent men into my house to kill my husband while I slept 3 feet away from him. And 3 weeks ago, both of those plans ended with your operative fleeing into the night and your assassins zip-tied on my kitchen floor. If you think tonight is going to end any differently, you've badly misjudged exactly who you're speaking to. Something shifted behind the old man's eyes, not fear exactly, but recalibration, the look of a predator realizing the prey had teeth he hadn't accounted for. He smiled then, slow and unpleasant, and reached into his jacket to produce a slim folder of his own, offering it to her without a word. Simone didn't take it. What is that supposed to be? A courtesy, he said. Before I use it. Your grandmother made enemies you never learned about, because she was careful enough to keep certain names out of the stories she told her granddaughter. I found one of those names 3 months ago. A man your grandmother had believed dead for 20 years. He is very much alive, Mrs. Kim, and very interested in what remains of a family fortune he still believes was stolen from him. Simone kept her expression perfectly still, though something cold moved through her chest at the words. You're bluffing. He tucked the folder away again, unhurried. Ask your cousin what he found in Lagos last month. Ask him why he hasn't told you yet. He inclined his head, the picture of old-world courtesy even as the threat settled into the air between them. I did not come to Seoul tonight to threaten your husband's family with violence, Mrs. Kim. I came to remind you that some thrones have older claims than the ones you inherited. Enjoy your evening. He walked away into the crowd before Simone could respond, and she stood alone near the private lounge for a long moment, champagne glass forgotten in her hand. The particular vertigo of realizing the ground beneath her had just shifted in a direction she hadn't accounted for. Someone had been watching. She realized a moment later. A young woman in pale blue silk, positioned near the terrace doors with the careful stillness of someone who'd clocked the entire exchange and understood exactly what she'd witnessed. Simone recognized her immediately. Kang Seo-yeon, daughter of their gala's hosts, a minor player in Seoul's social hierarchy, but one with a talent for gossip that traveled fast through exactly the circles that mattered most. By tomorrow, half the city would know something significant had passed between the Choi wife and the Ajiro patriarch tonight, even if no one knew precisely what. The cost of the confrontation, Simone understood now, hadn't been avoided after all. It had simply been delayed, and it had just arrived in the form of a rumor that would follow her into every room she entered from now on. If you've stayed with this story through every quiet cruelty, every careful reversal, every moment Simone chose restraint over rage, thank you for trusting it was building toward something worth this wait. Whether tonight is your very first episode or you've been counting down to this confrontation since the beginning, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Tap like if you believe a woman who's been underestimated her whole life deserves exactly this moment. And subscribe if you don't want to miss what happens when the Ajiro family makes their final move. She found Tae-hyun near the orchestra 20 minutes later, deep in conversation with 2 elder statesmen from a rival family, and something in her must have shown on her face despite her best efforts, because he excused himself the moment he saw her and crossed the ballroom in 6 long strides. What happened? I introduced myself to your problem, Simone said quietly, letting him guide her toward the terrace doors, away from the crowd's periphery vision. He knows exactly who he's dealing with now. But he also came with something I wasn't prepared for, a name from my grandmother's past, someone who's supposedly still alive, still angry, still interested in a fortune he thinks was stolen from him decades ago. Tae-hyun's jaw tightened. Do you believe him? I don't know yet, but Marcus has been keeping something from me, and I intend to find out what tonight. She exhaled slowly, watching the city lights scattered across the Han River beyond the terrace railing. And there's something else. We were seen. Kang Seo-yeon watched the whole exchange from across the room. By morning, half of Seoul will know something happened between us, even if they don't know what. Then we control what they think they saw. Tae-hyun's hand found the small of her back, steady, grounding. Tomorrow, you and I will be seen together everywhere that matters, calm, united, exactly the picture of a couple with nothing to fear. Whatever rumor Seoyeon spreads, we make sure the version people believe is the one we choose to tell. Simone looked at him for a long moment, something loosening in her chest at the easy competence of it. Not just a man offering comfort, but a partner offering strategy, meeting her exactly where she stood instead of asking her to explain herself smaller. "Getting good at this," she said. "I'm learning from the best," he said, and pulled her close enough that his jacket settled warm around her shoulders against the cold December air. Outside, the terrace overlooked the Han River, city lights scattered across the water like something spilled and glittering. Taehyun's hand came up to cradle her jaw, thumb tracing her cheekbone with a tenderness that still felt new enough to catch her off guard every time. "I don't want to just stand beside you," Taehyun said, closing the distance between them until she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze, city lights reflected in his dark eyes. "I want to be someone you trust enough to fight with, not for you, with you. That's a big ask, after 8 years of proving you didn't see me at all." "I know." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "But I'm asking anyway. Because I've spent 3 weeks watching you become the most extraordinary person I've ever known, and I refuse to spend whatever time I have left pretending I don't want every part of that. The danger, the power, the woman who scares old men in ballrooms without raising her voice." He pulled back just enough to look at her properly. "I want all of it, Simone. I want all of you." She kissed him then, on the terrace overlooking the river, with the orchestra's music drifting faintly through the doors behind them and the entire glittering danger of the night still unresolved beyond the terrace railing. Kissed him with something that had stopped being careful weeks ago and had finally, fully become want. "Take me home," she murmured against his mouth. "I need to make a phone call, and after that, I don't want to think about the Ajiros or my grandmother's secrets or anything else for the rest of the night." Drive back to the estate passed in charged silence, Taehyun's hand resting on her thigh the entire way, his thumb tracing slow circles that made it difficult for Simone to focus on anything except the promise of what waited for them once they were alone. The moment the bedroom door closed behind them, the careful restraint both of them had practiced for 3 weeks finally gave way completely. His hands finding the zipper of her gown as she worked the buttons of his shirt, both of them moving with the unhurried certainty of two people who had already decided, somewhere on that terrace, exactly how the rest of the night would go. "Tell me to stop," Taehyun murmured against her throat, his hands framing her waist. "If this isn't what you want." "Wanted this since the kitchen," Simone admitted, pulling him closer, "and I hated myself a little for it every single day since." "Hate yourself," he said, lifting his head to look at her properly, something raw and unguarded in his expression that she'd never once seen from him in 8 years of marriage. "Not for this, not for wanting something that's finally being offered honestly." What followed was neither rushed nor careless. It was 8 years of distance finally collapsing into something neither of them tried to name. Gold jewelry set carefully aside on the dresser, emerald silk hung over the chair instead of discarded on the floor. The kind of intimacy that came from two people choosing, deliberately, to finally be fully known by each other after too long spent invisible. Later, tangled together beneath the sheets with rain beginning to tap softly against the windows, Simone lay with her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, and felt something settle inside her that she hadn't expected to feel again in this house, something that felt dangerously, terrifyingly close to home. "Stay," Taehyun murmured into her hair, his arms tightening around her. "Not just tonight, all of it. Stay and let me spend the rest of this marriage proving I finally understand what I have." Simone pressed a kiss to his chest, over the steady beat of his heart, and didn't answer right away. Because for the first time in 8 years, she wasn't sure the answer needed to be spoken aloud at all. She woke before dawn to the sound of her false phone buzzing on the nightstand, Taehyun still asleep beside her, one arm draped possessively across her waist. Simone eased free carefully, pulling on a robe against the pre-dawn chill, and crossed to the window, answering in a whisper. "Left the city an hour ago," Marcus said, and something in his voice made her stomach tighten. "Ijiro, private jet filed flight plan to Lagos, but Simone before he left, one of my people intercepted a call he made. He's not backing down. He's escalating to his own father's old contacts. There are names on that call I haven't heard spoken aloud in almost a decade." "Told me himself at the gala," Simone said quietly. "A name from my grandmother's past, someone who's supposedly still alive. He said to ask you what you found in Lagos last month." Silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that Simone knew, before he even spoke, that Marcus had been carrying something he hadn't wanted to hand her yet. "I was going to tell you," he said finally. "I just wanted to confirm it first before I brought you something that might not even be true." "Marcus, name is Adwael Ackhafer," Marcus said quietly. "He worked for your grandmother 30 years ago before you were born. There was a falling out, money, betrayal. The details are murky even now. Your grandmother told the family he'd died in a fire in Lagos in the 90s. I found him 3 weeks ago, alive, running a shipping operation that's been quietly funding the Ejiro family's expansion for the last 5 years." Simone closed her eyes, the rain still falling soft outside the window, the warmth of the bed and the man in it suddenly feeling very far away. "He believes my grandmother stole something from him," she said, not quite a question. "He believes she stole everything from him. And Simone, he's been waiting 30 years for a reason to come after what's left of her legacy. Ejiro just handed him one, wrapped up as a favor between allies." Simone gripped the phone tighter, watching the first gray light of dawn creep over the estate's private garden below, the plum tree bare now with winter, the stone bench where she and Taehyun had first begun to find their way back to each other still visible in the half-light. "Then it's time," she said quietly, "that I finally opened that folder you left me." She dressed quietly, careful not to wake Taehyun, and made her way down to the study where the leather folder from the tea house had sat unopened for 3 weeks in a locked drawer of its own. The false-backed drawer upstairs had held 8 years of careful secrets. This one, she understood now, was about to demand she stop keeping them. She opened it at the desk, the same desk where Taehyun had kissed her 2 nights earlier, floor plans and family history spread out under the same lamp. Inside were the things Marcus had promised: accounts, alliances, the loyalty of people who had never stopped waiting for the quiet queen to return, but also, tucked into the very back, a single photograph she hadn't expected. Her grandmother, decades younger, standing beside a tall man with a guarded smile, both of them dressed for what looked like a celebration. On the back, in her grandmother's careful handwriting, A. Ackhafer before everything. Simone stared at the photograph for a long time, the weight of 30 years of buried history settling into her hands, and understood with sudden, absolute clarity that whatever came next, whatever Adwael Ackhafer wanted, whatever the Ejiro family had built on the foundation of his grievance, she was no longer choosing between the throne and the marriage. She was choosing to become someone capable of protecting both. The bedroom door opened behind her sometime later, and Taehyun appeared in the doorway, hair still sleep-mussed, watching her with the folder open in front of her and understanding, without needing to be told, exactly what she'd decided. "Going back," he said quietly. Not an accusation, not fear, just recognition. "I'm going to finish something that started before either of us was born," Simone said, closing the folder gently. "But I'm not walking away from you to do it, Taehyun. I already tried that once. I'm not interested in choosing between the 2 halves of my life again." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. "Then let me help you finish it," he said. "Not because I have to, because I want to be the kind of man who stands in the fire with you instead of watching from somewhere safe." Simone looked at him for a long moment, the man who had grabbed her wrist in a dining room full of witnesses 8 weeks ago, unaware of everything she was, and who now knelt in front of her, finally willing to see all of it and stay anyway. "Then we start today," she said, and kissed him once, soft and certain, before rising to face whatever waited for them both in Lagos, in Seoul, in the long, unfinished history her grandmother had never quite told her the whole truth about. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and the first real light of morning was breaking gold over the estate, the plum tree bare, the garden quiet, a new season beginning for both of them whether either was fully ready for it or not. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with us while telling it, that means more than you know. To everyone who's been here since the very first episode, and to everyone just discovering Simone's story tonight, thank you for watching, wherever in the world you're joining us from. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Tap like if you believe love can survive even the deadliest kind of war. And subscribe, because the next chapter of the Quiet Queen's story, the one that finally takes her back to the throne she left behind, is only just beginning.